Well, I sure hope I didn't make you scream. It's because we're talking about the Scream movies today. So recently I went through and I watched all of the Scream movies. I was on a stupid long road trip and I had all the time in the world. And it's a series that I've always kind of wanted to look into, but just never had the time until I did. So I watched all 6 of them. There is another one coming out soon, which is part of the reason why I wanted to do this anyway. And maybe I can do another one of these later for the new one and see kind of how I feel about it and where I think it ranks with the other ones. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Today I just want to take some time and talk about those first 6 Scream movies. I knew next to nothing about these movies when I started watching them. Pretty much the only thing I knew was that the killer was Ghostface, and I knew pretty much nothing about that at all besides just the mask. And I knew that Matthew Lillard was in one of them, and I knew that Jenna Ortega was at least in one of them. But that is the extent of my knowledge. I went in pretty much completely blind. I've always liked scary movies, so Scream was always a series I wanted to give a try. I know that they're kind of on the borderline of being scary. I did kind of know that going in, but I had a feeling it would carry that signature slasher identity, so I was excited to dive in. After watching them, I can confidently say they are slasher movies, parodies of them, I suppose, but slasher movies nonetheless. As I watched them, I made notes of kind of my thoughts of the experience, and I want to share those thoughts with you now. I'll pretty much be reviewing each movie, and then at the end, I'll try to give them a ranking of kind of where I think they would fall in a list of which one is best and which one is worse. I also think I should mention that I don't really know what the Scream community thinks of these movies. Like, I don't know which ones they say is, these are the best ones and these are the worst ones. I really don't know. These are just my personal opinion from what I took away from it during my experience with the films. So sorry if this does not exactly line up with what you think. But anyway, let's just dive right into it. Let's start with Scream 1. Going into Scream 1 completely blind was quite the experience. I didn't really know what quite to expect. As I mentioned up top, I knew pretty much nothing. I did kind of know they were in parody territory, but I didn't know if they would be quite like scary movie level or if they were going to be more of a light parody. And I could say coming away from it that it is definitely more in the light parody. It does genuinely try to be a slasher movie at times. And the first one, I think, is really the truest form of that. It does mention slasher films quite a bit, and it is a little meta. But this, for all intents and purposes, it is a slasher movie through and through. It doesn't really feel like too much of a parody aside from some funny jabs here and there. The movie starts off with a killing scene, kind of setting the threat and showing Ghostface, obviously not revealing his identity. And then it kind of moves into the main plot where you follow this girl, Sydney Prescott, I think is her name. Man, if I get that wrong, that is going to be bad. But I'm pretty sure that's her name. And she's kind of the main character of this movie and several of the other Scream movies. Several of these big kind of scary movie franchises always have their main character, and Sydney Prescott is kind of that, especially for the first few. And to be honest, the more that I think back to it and the more that I review my notes, there's really not just a ton to dig into with this movie. Because whether this is a good thing or a bad thing for you, this is very much a straightforward slasher movie. And when I say that, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that formula works perfectly fine, especially if you have the right twists and turns to it. And guess what? This movie does. Scream 1 is very much a whodunit kind of movie. It's never explicitly said to you, but you're led to believe that someone within her friend group is probably responsible for the Ghostface killings. Really, you're led onto that pretty early on when you meet Sidney Prescott's boyfriend. It's not explicitly said, but it's pretty apparent to the audience and even some of the characters that he is a high likelihood suspect to be Ghostface. I mean, to me personally, his voice even sounded kind of like Ghostface voice over the phone, so it would make sense. But that also kind of felt too obvious, so it was a little bit of a red herring. Regardless, it's a fun mystery, and you're always looking for more clues onto who might have done it. And then, of course, at the end of the movie, there is a really fun kind of twist, and then another twist again to bring it all right back around. I'm not going to just dig into every single detail, but if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen the movie, please go watch it. It is a lot of fun. I'm going to end up spoiling this ending later when I talk about some of the other movies, but I won't talk about that just yet. All that I can say really about the first movie is that it's really fun. I was not expecting to enjoy any of the movies quite as much as I did this first one, but it gave me a lot of hope for starting these movies, and I was really looking forward to watching them all after this. It was a really fun time, had some great twists. Overall, it's a really good scary movie. Pop it on if you don't have anything to watch during next spooky season. So with the first one down, I was really ready to go and watch Scream 2. I was not expecting to have fun with that first one, and after I did, I was like, well, hey, maybe there is a reason there are 6 of these movies. Maybe they are really good. So I went into Scream 2 with higher expectations. And while I don't want to reveal too much about my final ranking, what I will say is that those expectations were not necessarily let down, but maybe not quite met. Again, I don't really feel that hitting every plot point is going to be super beneficial to this video. I feel like if you're watching this, you've either already seen all 6 of them or have never seen a single one of them, and you're just kind of curious. And I think regardless of which camp you're in, I can kind of give you the idea without having to go through the movie point by point. But with that out of the way, what I just want to say as a whole about this movie is that it just kind of feels like a worse version of the first movie. It still kind of has that meta, jokey, kind of punny angle to it that the first movie has, but it's cranked up a little more, and I would say not in a fun way. It's not quite to an annoying level, but sometimes you're just kind of like, okay, come on. Like, at least pretend like you don't know that you're a movie. There are some times when it really does feel like the parody angle takes a little too much of the driver's seat sometimes. But again, it's never a full-on parody movie. It's more so just parodying tropes and the ideas of slasher films in general. But parody thing aside, I know I just made a big stink about that, but really I don't think that that's too big of a deal. To me, the biggest downsides to this movie are, one, some of the killings didn't feel super justified. I mean, I wouldn't say that they were wrong, because sometimes having an unexpected kill here and there can keep the audience on the edge of their seats. But ultimately, I felt like the payoff wasn't worth killing off, namely one of the characters that I did enjoy. But I mean, hey, whatever. Again, that's a bigger downside to me, but still not quite a movie killer. To me, the biggest downside, the one that really made me think, man, this one just isn't as good, was the killer reveal at the end. I think this is probably the worst killer reveal out of all of the movies. I don't know if that's a hot take at all, but it didn't feel like it from what I watched. This is kind of a light spoiler for the series as a whole, but when you're watching these movies, you're always kind of wondering A, who it is, and B, why did they do it? It's a thing that happens in all of these movies. It's typically someone you've seen before, and they probably have some kind of connection to the main character, and the reason that they did it is typically bound back to the past in some way. Which, to be fair, a lot of those tropes weren't necessarily set by this time in the second movie, but by the time you're at movie 6, it makes this movie seem a lot different from the other ones, kind of like the black sheep of the family. I say all of that to say that the killers it reveals are just kind of two random people. I mean, yes, you are introduced to these people, but they don't feel quite as substantial as the killers from the first one, who were pretty much there the whole movie, and killers you'll see in future movies, which are there quite a bit, or at least more than these two. It just felt really out of nowhere. Now, don't get me wrong, their motive is not the worst motive. There are worse motives in this series, but as for the killers themselves, I felt like these were the most annoying, just because of how out of nowhere it felt, at least for me as the viewer. So I guess for my final thoughts on this movie, I would kind of wrap it all up by saying it's still a fun slasher movie, but just with everything I liked so much about the first one, kind of made a little bit worse with an unsatisfying ending, and overall still a fun experience, but not one that I am as enthusiastic to jump back into as the first movie. Alright, let's jump into Scream 3. Let's keep moving. Scream 3, much like Scream 2, is very meta, but that premise is actually kind of fun. You get the feeling, even from the very beginning of this movie, that this is supposed to be a trilogy. It seems like whenever they were making this movie, maybe they thought they weren't going to get any more. And so the rules that they set out from the very beginning is that, hey, this is the end of a trilogy, so anything can happen. I actually kind of like that concept because it doesn't just illustrate it to the audience, it flat out tells them, like, hey, anyone could die right now, so stay locked in. That might feel a little annoying to some viewers, but to me, I thought it was kind of fun to look at it like that. And also, the killer at the end is, his motive is pretty good, and his overall, like, wrapping into the whole story, I thought, would have been a decent place to end this series if they had decided to end it there. Now, we'll get into it later, but I do think some of the other movies have a lot of substance to them, so actually ending it here would have probably been a mistake. But if it had ended here, it wouldn't have been just that terrible. I think that Scream 3 is still a fun movie. It's a fun premise. The killer at the end is pretty good. Overall, I thought it was an enjoyable experience. And I know we're kind of rapid firing through these movies, but we've got 6 of them to get through, and I've got a little more to talk about at the end with the ranking and everything, so I can't just spend a ton of time on each movie. I am one man after all. One thing I forgot to mention as I was glancing through my notes here was that Scream 3 was a bit more goofy. I wouldn't say that any of them get to a full-on goofy level, but just sometimes the chase sequences and maybe even some of the language in the movie just feels a bit funny. I don't really know how else to describe it, but you'll just kind of catch yourself chuckling at times. This one really embraced that in a couple areas that the first two really didn't, which I could see how that could be a takeaway for some people. But to me, I don't know, it was kind of fun. But all right, wrap that one up. Let's go to Scream 4 really fast. Let's just start this off right. This has the worst motive for the killer out of all the movies. I know I said I wasn't going to harp on specific plot points, but I feel like I have to with this one. I mean, the killer's whole motive is, I just want your life, Sidney Prescott. That's basically her whole motive is, I am your cousin, and I'm jealous of you because your family got murked, and people made you famous because of that, and now I want your life, so I'm gonna copy it by being the killer and framing and putting myself in that position, even going as far as to kill her own mom to accomplish that. Maybe not necessarily an unrealistic motive, but definitely the worst one, in my opinion. I think it's pretty weak. But, with that being said, this movie is still pretty fun. I don't know if I've really shown enough light on this, but to me, what makes these movies so fun is trying to figure out who did it, who's the killer. And this one had some pretty fun twists and turns to it, very similar actually in a lot of ways to the first movie. It's the stuff like that that I really like, the stuff that keeps you guessing and keeps you on your toes, never quite knowing what totally to expect. It's one of the most fun parts about these movies, and I think the fourth movie does a really good job at that. But that's kind of the main stuff I wanted to talk about with this fourth movie. It's overall still really fun. It's got a bad killer motive, but it still has enough going on, and it's still a very interesting movie that it's still very engaging, and I would still recommend it. And I do consider this still to be in the good movie territory. Now we go on to Scream 5, and guess what? We got a new main cast. Don't worry, Sidney Prescott is still here. You didn't lose her just yet. But this new cast is pretty good, and this is where Jenna Ortega comes in. I know I didn't talk a lot about the cast. I haven't really done that enough justice, I guess, because I don't want to just get in the weeds of explaining plot. That just kind of feels irrelevant to me. But the cast from the first four movies remains consistent, and they're all pretty good. I mean, sure, you lose people to like getting murdered, or maybe they are the killer, or whatever, but the main kind of core cast is there from the beginning, even until this movie. And they finally decide to switch that up here, and this is also where Jenna Ortega comes in, and their new group is kind of interesting. I like the history tie-in that they give with it, and I guess I will go ahead and kind of explain that just briefly, is that the new main character is the son of the boyfriend from the first movie. So the original, one of the original Ghostface killers, this is his daughter. And that's kind of an interesting concept, especially since she's supposed to be the good guy and the person we're rooting for. And they kind of tie in this psychological element of how she's worried she'll turn out like him, and how she will she's afraid she's gonna become a serial killer basically. And that's a pretty fun angle to look at. Maybe fun's the wrong word, entertaining, I guess maybe. Interesting. But regardless, this tie-in ends up being one of the main motives for this movie's killers, which are fine. I enjoyed the killers here. The killers themselves are fine, but their motive is not the best. I debated whether or not this was the worst motive. The reason why this one is so bad is because it is very, very meta. In fact, I would say this is the most meta that any of the movies get, because it is directly tied into the killer's main motive. Here, if I remember correctly, I didn't take good enough notes on this, but basically the killers wanted to revitalize the franchise, kinda. They're both big stab movie fans, and that's something I'm just now realizing I haven't even explained. And this is why I've been trying to stay away from the plot of these movies, because anytime you step on something, you have to explain it, and the stab movies are a very confusing part to explain. But just a basic crash course in case you haven't seen these movies and are for some reason watching this. In the Scream movies, there is a fake movie series started in the second one called Stab. the Stab movies are supposed to be like true crime recreation movies of the events in the Scream movies. The idea being that there is some kind of pop culture relevance of those events in the Scream movies in the real world. But then later, as it goes on, they're not allowed to use the Sidney Prescott story in the Stab movies anymore, and so they kind of start doing their own thing, and I guess people don't like it or something. And so this is kind of their attempt to revitalize the story from what I remember. Maybe this is the worst killer motive now that I'm talking about it out loud. I mean, yeah, the motive of the last killer was pretty bad, just kind of wanted her life, but this one is kind of a step below that because they're kind of in the same boat, but they're also doing it for the movie, I think. What a strange reason to go on this whole killing spree and everything. It's very bizarre. Not to mention, this is a very hard one to tell who the killers were too, and not in like a satisfying way. There were just so many things that fell into place luckily, and I know you have to suspend your intelligence for these movies sometimes and just kind of say, it's just how it happened. But in this movie specifically, there's so many things that could have just went the wrong way that were left up to chance and just worked out for the killers. It was kind of frustrating a little bit to me when they were eventually revealed. And I know I've talked really negatively about this movie so far, but honestly, it's still really fun. And I think that is partially because of the cast. Also, I'm sure the budget here was higher. There were some really cool looking scenes in this movie. I overall really enjoyed it. I thought it was still a decently good movie. Also, rest in peace Dewey. He was my favorite character. Bless up. Then we move on to Scream 6. As of recording this video, this is the most current, the last Scream movie. However, there is Scream 7 that is supposed to come out in February, so hopefully I'll be able to add to this shortly. But Scream 6 is at this point the last movie in the series. So this movie takes place in New York, which in a lot of ways I think is a little more engaging. The plot is still really solid. It's not nearly as reliant on meta commentary, which to me is a good thing. I wouldn't say that it ever got so distracting it was a bad thing in any of these movies, but this one certainly is starting to go back more to a root level, and I really enjoy that. And also a really good thing about this movie is it has a really good whodunit part, which to me is the best part. If you can get your whodunit part to be interesting, to me it's a good Scream movie. And this one has one of the best. It twists and turns quite a few times. Red herrings are actually red herrings. Well, some of them I suppose. And I think that the killer reveal at the end is both surprising and satisfying. And the motive is a good motive. So there's not really a ton to say about this movie aside from the fact that for the Scream series, it's a good movie, and it's a good movie in general. You should check it out. And that's kind of what I think about these movies in a nutshell. So now that you have my general thoughts, why don't we get into the nitty and gritty and rank them? Since there's only 6 of them, let's start at number 6 and work our way up to number 1. And another thing I want to note before we get into this is that, I don't really know public perception of these movies. I don't know what Scream fans think. So I don't really know what the popular order of these is. So I very well might put one of your favorite ones low or one of your least favorite ones pretty high. These are just my personal opinions at the end of the day. I'll try to give my reasoning, but you're perfectly fine if you don't agree with me. So let's just get started at number 6. At number 6, I have Scream 2. I just found it to be the least engaging, and again, to me, one of the best parts is the whodunit, and Scream 2 had the least satisfying reveal. I thought that the killer reveal, the motive was fine, but the killer reveal itself was just like a wet fart. It had basically no weight to it. I found this to be one of the most unengaging Scream movies, actually the most unengaging. It is number 6 after all. It is just overall a poor example of these movies. I still think overall it's a decent watch, but it's by far the worst in the series, at least from the 6 that are currently out. Then let's bump up to number 5, and here I have Scream 4. I don't know how that's gonna go over, because Scream 4 is way better than 2. Like, in my opinion, it is significantly better, but I still think the motive is pretty weak. I'm fighting with that in my head, whether or not it or 5 is a worse motive, but I enjoyed 5 so much more that I'm willing to put 4 lower, because its killer motive is bad, and the movie itself is still decent, but I thought it was quite a bit below some of the other movies I have above it. And speaking of what's above it, my number 4 ranking is Scream 3. Scream 3 has an interesting killer, an interesting motive and tie-in. It feels like it's a satisfying bow on the series, even though it wasn't. But it was a pretty neat way that they attempted to tie everything together there in that movie, and I did appreciate it. And I thought the sets were cool. I thought that the killings were cool. The concept itself was, yeah, sure, a little meta, but not super annoying. And overall, I thought it was the 4th best one. It's a pretty okay movie. Then we move on to number 3 with Scream 5. I know, quite a bit above Scream 4, right? Well, while I do think the motive is bad in Scream 5, and I still stand by that, I do think it's a really engaging movie, even though they killed Dewey, and that sucks. But it's just new movie, bigger budget. It's exactly the crap they say in these movies. Like, newer movie, bigger budget, bigger kills. But it's true, man. It's just fun. Now, you can screw it up, like you see where with Scream 2 being at the bottom of the list, and it definitely had a higher budget than Scream 1. But I think that in Scream 5's favor here, the bigger scale really saves it from that lackluster ending. And the twists and turns of figuring out who the killers were is still fun enough that I think it offsets the motive being a little bad. My number 2 is Scream 6. It pretty much has everything I enjoy a lot about the first movie, kind of cranked up to an 11. To me, having good twist and a satisfying killer reveal and a good motive are the main things you need to have a good Scream movie. And I think that Scream 6 hits a home freaking run. This movie is awesome. Like, yeah, it's a little meta in some areas, but it's mostly grounded, and I found it to be really, really enjoyable. And I think it's the 2nd best Scream movie, which is very hopeful, because hopefully 7 will continue on right at the heels where this one left off. But before I get into any of that at all, let's cap off this list with my number 1 pick, which is obviously Scream 1. I know it's the original, but I'm not biased. I'm not saying this because of nostalgia or anything. I watched all of these movies in one sitting, but what I can say is the first one was just the best. It was the most engaging, it was the most gritty, the most realistic. Um, and again, there's the things that I think make a good Scream movie is the whodunit interesting. Yes, you're constantly guessing the whole movie. Like, is it the boyfriend? Is it really him? Or no, it can't be. Oh wait, maybe it is. And no, it wasn't. I knew it wasn't. And then it actually is. And it's just the twists and turns is directly tied into that, and I think it's super fun. And then the motive, and the motive is, of course, the original motive, and I think that it's a pretty solid motive, all things considered. And just the way it subverted my expectations, I was really blown away by how good that first movie is. I cannot stress enough that if you've never seen these movies, I don't know if I would necessarily recommend binge watching them all like I did, but the first movie is definitely a good watch, whether or not you intend to watch them all or not. I know I've alluded to the ending. Actually, I straight up spoiled it, so sorry. But it's still a fun watch. I think you should check out the first one for sure. But I think that all the movies, even 2, of course, the one I think that's the worst, I think they're all fun. I think they're all like decent. There's not a Scream movie that I would say is just downright bad. I would just say that at its worst, it's okay, and at its best, it's really, really good and really fun. And those are my thoughts. That's Scream 1 through Scream 6. I watched them all, I talked about them all, I ranked them all. Overall, pretty fun. Again, I don't know if you necessarily should marathon them all like I did, but if you do decide to do so, I think there's a lot worse movie series you could marathon. In fact, I have. And that's kind of something I wanted to talk about at the end of this video is recently I've been going on these strange obsessions where I'll watch entire movie series just in a row. And I've watched 4 movie series now that I kind of would like to talk about, but I'm not sure exactly if I'm doing the best job at conveying my thoughts. So please let me know in the comments down below what you thought of this and what I could improve on for if I decide to continue doing this in the future. Another video I've been thinking about making is I watched through all the Twilight movies, and I thought about giving my general thoughts on those, as well as maybe the Terrifier movies, since I just watched those. But I've got a lot of movie stuff I'd like to talk about, so please let me know in the comments on maybe some things you would like to see me do differently, or the things I did good you would like to see me do more of. But with all that out of the way, that just about wraps it up. I am excited for Scream 7 coming out. I will be watching it when it comes out, and I will, even if it's a YouTube short, I will make some kind of review on it and put it in that ranking. So if you want to see that, make sure you're subscribed, make sure you hit the bell notification for whenever we make new videos, and well, just thank you so much for watching. Take care.